Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 84th episode this week, where we'll be recapping the Patriots' most recent losses to the Cardinals and the Bills, and previewing their upcoming game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter/X and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our what is it called?
Website?
No,
TikTok?
Nice. Yeah, TikTok. What's our
Yep.
TikTok handle, Kevin?
Same thing. Pat's 300 level pod.
Okay. Kevin takes care of the TikTok, so that's why I'm not as familiar with that. But so Kevin, I know more of the same the last couple of weeks. We didn't have an episode since the Cardinals game because there wasn't really much else to talk about because it's been the same, rehashing the same things over and over and over again. But wanted to mostly talk about the Bills. We're recording on Monday, so the game was yesterday. What was your overall thoughts of the game? I know going into it, we were expecting a blowout. Bills had gone 8 straight games of scoring at least 30 points. So what was your thoughts on a game where the Patriots lost 24-21?
Yeah, I think kind of going to this, we had the expectation where there was be a high likelihood they'd get blown out. I think both of us kind of said in kind of our group chat that it did have the opportunity where this could be a letdown game for the Bills, where
Yeah.
they came off of some really hard fought games the last 4 to 5 weeks and some really good opponents. And you're usually set for when you're like that to have kind of a letdown game. You would see this with the Patriots for all their in the last 20 years
Yeah, and
when
like
they're really
2004
good.
against Miami in December, that night
Hmm.
game against the Browns in like the mid 2010s.
Yeah, you would have
And
one or two games where you would kind of it'd be that letdown where they would still sometimes win, but
yeah,
they would be a lot closer than it should be, and they played down to the opponent.
yeah.
So I think
And,
part of
and
it
the
is
Bill, the
that.
Bills too, historically, the last 4 years, we've seen this every single year where they have at least one of those games where they blow out a team that was a tough opponent, one of the top teams in the AFC or NFC, and then they lose the following week to the
Mhm.
terrible Jaguars, losing like 9-6 or something like
Yeah.
that. So it is something that we have seen. We haven't
Mhm.
seen it yet this year from the Bills, but
Yep, it's par for the course, kind of for them.
yeah,
And then I think part of it was that the Patriots were way more aggressive playing, and they played like they had something to lose. Where we didn't see that coming out of the bye. You would think
yeah,
that they looked. I never expected them to look that bad out of the bye,
yeah,
and they came out completely like they didn't really care. And then they looked like they were trying to coach for their lives, play for their lives at the first half of the game, and then it kind of went back to what we knew of the Patriots, where they couldn't keep this up for the full game. They started coaching scared. Started coaching. What they ended up starting to do was coaching not to get blown out,
yeah,
and that's the
yep,
biggest thing I had against this team, where he was coaching kind of like a wimp. He was like, oh, I don't want to get blown out. I'll lose my job if I just punt the ball here with 8 minutes to go. Then we won't get blown out, and it'll be a maybe a 3 point game, a 10 point game. It won't be a 17 point game.
yeah,
And he was coaching scared there, and that's the biggest thing I had about this game. And you see this every single week, and that's the thing where it's basically like a recording where it's every single time this stuff, the same things happening over and over again, coaching mistakes. Um, it's not really there's not really much new to glean off of this. They
yeah,
they did come out. I give them credit. They came out better.
yeah,
I think they had a better idea of how to handle Josh than some of the other people. But I think the other part of that is where this is divisional familiarity, where you've had the same game plan and had the same kind of tactics to use against Josh Allen over the past few years. So it's not like
yeah.
they were scheming up against a new team, scheming up against a new kind of system, that sort of thing. So I think they had a little help there.
Yeah, and then
Uh,
also too with that as well is I know from 2020 to 2022, Josh Allen has destroyed the Patriots minus that crazy wind game. But
mhm,
the last 3 times they faced him, Bill had figured out a game plan of how to stop him. Where in 2022, it was a close game where they lost by I think 7 or 10, 3, 7 or 10, something like that.
mhm,
2023, they won at home, and then they lost a close game. Also, the second game of 2022, they lost 35-21,
mhm,
but two of those touchdowns were kick returns for touchdowns. So really only allowed the offense to have 3 touchdowns.
mhm.
So you saw the Patriots figure out a game plan of how to stop Allen or at least slow him down. And that's something that Mayo, Covington, Bryan, and Pellegrino were all on the staff last year, so they at least had that access to that game plan versus other teams where the Cardinals they haven't played in 4 years or 2 years,
Hmm.
whatever it is for them. So it's not as familiar with them. So
Yeah.
it,
Um,
yeah, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, kind of other thing in the coaching. I think the other thing that we've seen, it's now 7 straight weeks with May having a turnover, and that's something that he really needs to kind of learn from um, going into next year. And
Yeah,
I'm still, it's getting a little concerning by the amount of times it's happening. It's not. With
I'm
that
not as
said,
yeah,
some of
I'm
them
not as
weren't really
concerned.
his fault. So
I'd
like
say
there
more
was
than
that.
half are not his fault.
Yeah. But I think it is something that, and this year is a lost season anyway. So I'd rather him learn now what he can and can't do, and then learn from that going into the next year. So that's why
Yep.
I'm not really that concerned yet. It would be going into next year. What does he look like next year? Is it still the same, or is it getting better? And he has gotten better. So,
Yeah.
but it's just some concerning things there.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned because, as you said, a lot of them I wouldn't put on his fault. Where the fumble to Mondre that ended up being a touchdown, I put that more on Mondre. But again, he threw it harder than he should have. But it was a terrible play call to begin with. So
Hmm.
then the interception, Hooper fell down. He didn't run a clean route to begin with. If he ran a clean route, maybe he still gets that. But again, it was a great play by the defender as well as not a great throw by May. There was one to Hunter Henry a few weeks ago went right off his hands. There's the one to Booty a few weeks ago that went right off his hands and then into the defender. So I say half of them aren't his fault. There were some where it's the Mac Jones interceptions from the past few
Hmm.
years, but it's not like that every single game where that's what the turnover is. If it was
Yeah.
that, I'd be more concerned.
Hmm. Um.
So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
so just unrelated to that, but just my overall thoughts of the game as well is it was good to see life. It was good to see them play as close as they did, where they were dominating the first half. Second half, it was the turnovers that killed them. But it's also frustrating because we saw the potential of what the talent on this roster is. Again, it's not a Super Bowl caliber team this year, but it's a team that, with good coaching, should be fighting for the playoffs at least. You
Hmm.
see, the Broncos are in the playoffs right now. The Chargers, in a rebuild, are in the playoffs. Again, they don't have a rookie quarterback. They have an established quarterback, but still, it's a team that had a terrible defense last year and they got rid of their top weapons and they're pretty much in commanding role for a playoff spot. Whereas, so we saw the life from this team, but is that's the frustrating thing is it's so inconsistent, along with terrible fundamentals and terrible situational football. Where
Hmm.
Mapu, good interception, everyone on the defense should have told him to stay in, as well as he himself should have known to stay in the end zone. Instead, the other defenders around him went to try and block people, and he
Hmm.
took it out and gets tackled at the 1 instead of it being at the 20-yard line. So you can't really do much on offense from that. That's something that he should have known, and the coaching should have put in him instinctually. There was the again terrible play call by that resulted in the touchdown on the lateral. But again, once Mondre gets destroyed, but you see all Patriots defender or Patriots players on offense just looking at the ball, standing around, whereas every single person on the Bills is running after the ball.
Hmm.
Again, in their position, they probably wouldn't be able to get to it just because Mondre's down, they're far away. But you at least have to fight for the ball. You have to put in some effort there. And A, it's just they didn't know that it was a fumble, or B, they just knew they weren't going to get it, so they weren't going to try. So that's something that pissed me off too. But again, bad tackling throughout the whole entire year. It was a good scheme this past game, but still, it's those fundamentals on offense and defense. Terrible situational football, bad penalties in key spots where it's on third down. Even the touchdown where they got at the end of the fourth quarter to make it a three-score game. It was first and goal on the 1, and it took them
10
tries to get
plays
in, 10
total, I
plays.
think. Yep.
Yeah, 9 or 10 plays to get in the end zone to get 1 yard.
Hmm.
It's just frustrating to see. You see the talent that they have to at least be, I'd say, mediocre this year. They
They should at
shouldn't be,
least be 500.
yeah,
With the team that
around
they
500.
have,
They
they
have
should
a
be around 500, plus or
they
minus a game or two. Either
exactly.
way, with good
And
coaching.
it's the they went from being a top 5 defense last year to the second worst, or I think DVOA, they're 30th in the NFL this year,
Hmm.
and they still have 2 games versus 2 good offenses to go. And this is the same, almost all the same players. And last year, you didn't have Christian Gonzalez, you didn't
Hmm.
have Marcus Jones, you had Barmore for the whole year, you had Peppers for the whole year, but you didn't have Gonzo Gonzalez. You lost Jack Jones, J.C. Jackson last year, so you were starting practice squad players from other teams as your starting cornerbacks last year. So it's just frustrating to see pretty much coaching be the reason why. Again, we were expecting growing pains this year. I don't think either of us were expecting it to be this bad
Hmm.
from a coaching perspective. So
Yep.
that's just a frustrating thing with the reports that Gerard being back next year. Again, hopefully they bring back some or bring in some experienced coaches to help him. But again, what experienced coaches are going to want to come here on offense where you know you're going into the lame duck year? Your only saving grace is you have uh, Drake May as your quarterback, and maybe that is something that you think you'll be able to fix and then show your talent. But on defense, if you move on from Covington, who the hell is going to want that position? If the
Hmm.
defense does well, Gerard Mayo is going to get all the credit because he's a defensive minded head coach. If the defense does bad, you're going to get the blame and you're going to get fired. So I don't
Yep.
see any, at least from a defensive perspective, it's lose lose. Maybe bring in a consultant like Eberflus as like a defensive consultant, as an
Yeah.
example, or
But
Sala or
like
someone.
I was saying, I think to you before, I don't really see them doing that where it's so the problem with the defensive coordinator is if they go down the route of canning Covington and they bring in someone else, what's Mayo responsible for? Mayo's supposed to be this defensive head coach, and if you're not bringing in someone that he already knows, so like let's say someone that was on like Flores' staff before, or someone that's been in the same defensive scheme, it's a pretty different scheme than what a lot of places run.
Yeah,
If you're not bringing in someone like that, number one, you're having a scheme that's not marrying what the players do. Number two, you're having a scheme that is not familiar with the head coach, and that he's even less removed from what he's doing now. And at that point, what is he doing?
yep,
Is the big thing, and it's more of kind of a target on Mayo if you fire Covington because that's his handpicked guy. That's what's running his defense, and I think they'd be more likely to say keep Covington, but you have to take control of the defense. You can't be the CEO head coach where you're kind of delegating to everything. And the problem with that is you delegated too much to everyone that hasn't done it before. So I would see it more likely that they'd keep Covington and make Mayo be more hands on the defense
yep,
than actually canning Covington. The problem with that is that they're probably going to can AVP where he's probably done the best out of everyone, I would
yeah,
say,
yeah.
and he has the best
Which is sad,
demeanor.
but like you've seen the offense improve. Part
Mhm.
of it is Drake May is your quarterback, but
Yeah.
also if you're installing a new offense, it takes time to get everyone up to speed, especially
Hmm.
with the football IQ you see of people in the wide receiver room
Yeah.
or their everything. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think if they do either fire Covington or they bring in I think if they fire him, they would have to bring in someone that's worked with Mayo before.
Hmm.
One person that comes to mind is Patrick Graham, who's currently the Raiders defensive coordinator. He
Hmm.
was Mayo's linebacker coach. He was on the Patriots staff for about 8 to 10 years. He went over to
Hmm.
Vegas when Josh went there. He's currently their defensive coordinator, so it would have to be if Pierce fires him or if they just completely clean slate
Hmm.
and then he's someone that comes in. Otherwise, if you keep Covington, I think they're definitely going to have to bring in a defensive assistant, like a fired head coach, Ron Rivera,
Hmm.
Matt Eberflus, Robert Sala, someone like that to help oversee it. Because if and when Mayo decides to fire Covington next year to save his job,
Hmm.
spoiler, looking forward to next year, assuming the trend continues, if the defense is still this bad with all the players you have, Mayo's never called defensive plays.
Hmm.
Never really done the game planning. So I wouldn't expect him to take over that role. He would have to have someone with prior experience to do that.
Hmm.
So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Covington's gone 100%, but I think they'll have to bring in someone either to replace Covington or to help assist Covington next year.
Yep. All right. Three up, three down, real quick. So three up. I've got Booty, Jonathan Jones, and Hunter Henry. Booty again, maybe not the smartest player,
Yeah.
but had a really good game, really good catch on the sideline. Jonathan Jones, I think this is probably his best game of the year.
Yeah.
And then Hunter Henry, it's been just stability for them. He's just dependable.
The thing with Hunter Henry that still
He
pisses
doesn't
me
turn
off,
around his
he
head,
doesn't turn
but
around, and that cost them. It would have been a first down, I believe.
mhm.
on one of the drives, and he was just slow, not looking. By the time he turned around, the ball was already there, like by him. But
Hmm.
if he turned around, he had the ball. So
Yeah.
it's just frustrating. It's been 4 years of that. Again, he's
Yeah.
your most dependable player on offense probably this year, but
Hmm.
it's just those little things that piss me off. But
Yeah.
I think those all make sense for me. I'd go Booty number one. His breakout game as a starter this year.
Hmm.
Jonathan Jones two, and then I'd go Drake May three. Again, I know they were the turnovers, but in 9-degree weather in Buffalo, go pretty much outplaying Josh Allen completely. So he had a
Hmm.
good game. There were some negatives, but he helped put the Patriots in the position they were, where they had a fighter's chance at the end of the game.
Yep. And then three down, I got Stevenson, Jacobs, Jennings, and then honorable mention Mayo. So Stevenson, you can't have those fumbles.
Yep.
The fumble, and then the that lateral play,
I
part of
still
it's on
put that
him.
lateral on as a fumble on Stevenson. I know in the
Yeah.
scorebook it's technically a fumble on May, but I put that on
Hmm.
Stevenson
Yeah, I would
where,
say it's partly on May, partly on AVP for even calling it in that
yeah, yep,
situation,
agree.
partly on Jacobs for missing the crack block there. But I would say the more of the onus would be on Stevenson. Jennings just it probably his worst game of the year was setting the edge,
Yep.
and then Mayo again gutless play calling towards the end of the game and kind of diverting to the way it is.
Yep, no, I agree. Stevenson number one. You just can't have those fumbles where if you include that lateral, that's 8 fumbles on him in 14 games. It's
Hmm.
just unsustainable. You can't with a team that's this mediocre is the
Hmm.
polite way of putting it. You can't have negative plays where you're giving the ball to opponents. If a defensive player makes a great play on an interception or something like that, you have to tip their
Hmm.
cap. You can't give them free turnovers, and that's something
Yeah.
that he's done all year. Number two, Jacobs as well. And then number three for me is Mayo, where again, they were aggressive in the first half, but in the second half, like you said, they were just coaching not to lose or not to get blown out. And I texted you that during the game too, where they were punting it. It's 4th and 3 at the 50. You're punting the ball away to the Bills, and you need 2 scores. You weren't sure if you're going to get the ball 2 times, and they didn't. They
Hmm.
only got it once. And then also, once you did get the ball back when you're down 10, the off the team showed no sense of urgency. It took 4 minutes to eventually get in the end zone, but
Hmm.
again, there's no it might have been even more than that. There's no sense of urgency, no rushing to get back to the line. They were just playing the game like they normally would. And again, if
Hmm.
you get that onside kick, which it actually was a pretty good kick. Onside kicks
Hmm.
are tough to begin with. It was a bad play by Buffalo to try and jump and touch the ball before the 45-yard line. That's a
Yeah.
mistake that was completely on them. So they had an opportunity to actually get that ball, but again, you saw the players on the Patriots not really diving into the ball where the guy on the Bills touched it and he was kind of surrounded by Buffalo Bills. So even if he didn't touch, like if he
Hmm.
didn't come in with it, they could have gotten it, but you didn't see them running towards it. But
Yeah.
again, it's frustrating. It's the lack of fundamentals as well. So I'm hoping things somehow turn around if Mayo is back, that he takes that year two leap that he's talking
Hmm.
about that he's going to take, which again, coaches shouldn't need to have a year two leap. Again, I understand a little bit, but to expect it to go from the worst coach team in football to even mediocre next year is, I will have to see. I'm not expecting
Yeah.
that, but
All right. So Chargers. We're gonna have to wrap this one up quick because I've got someplace to go. So we're just
yeah.
gonna give our predictions. So Chargers are favored minus 4.5 over under 42. I've got Chargers winning 27-17.
Yeah, that's a good score. The Chargers haven't really blown anyone out this year.
Yeah.
Their defense has been very good. Their offense, again, they got rid of most of their playmakers last year, and Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler. Lad McConkey has had a huge year for them this year as a rookie, someone that the Patriots could have drafted, and then they traded down to the Chargers so the Chargers could take him. Josh Palmer, one of their other receivers, has had a down year. I was expecting him to be good this year. I had him on my fantasy teams. He
Hmm.
sucked. Quinton Johnson Jacobs, I forget his name. Their former number one round wide receiver, has had a down year. So they have pieces on offense. Their defense has gotten markedly improved. They're a tough football team. I'd Patriots should at least have a punter's chance to win, but I think they're going to lose 34 34-20, but this is another game too where they've played the Chargers 3 times in the last 5 years, and Justin Herbert's 3 worst games of his career have come against the Patriots. Again,
Mhm.
that's when Bill and Steve were calling the defense game planning, but most of these defensive staff were still on the staff then, so they could still use that game plan to cause Herbert to have a bad game. And if you have some turnovers, maybe you'll have a chance. So Patriots do have a chance in this game, but I think the Chargers will win 34-20.
All right. So thank you everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter, Pat Straight Handle Level Pod. And we'll talk to you guys next time.